Good to see you guys.
Good to see you
I
too.
was
Thanks for coming
looking
on.
I was looking yesterday. You were at the New York Stock Exchange. Was this today or yesterday? You were
It
rolling
was
around there.
yesterday.
How was that?
Yeah. It was great. I've only the New York Stock Exchange is beautiful. All my interviews that I've done there in the past have been between like 8:30 and 10 a.m., which is when it's extremely busy. My interview yesterday and so it was like the quietest that I've seen the stock exchange, but it's a beautiful venue, and so it's great to be there.
What did you not talk about yesterday that you wish you did? That you want to cover on this show.
So I think yesterday, a lot of what we spoke about was, how banks are trying to slow down genius, right? I think what I wish we'd, gotten time to chat about a little bit more is, the opportunity for banks in stablecoins and maybe more of what we're doing because we're going to engage in what we see as the opportunity, right? And so yesterday was like very much like, why are banks trying to slow things down, which I think are very obvious reasons. Why are banks trying to slow down new technology that might threaten their business, right? But I think there's a lot to talk about around the opportunity. If banks and folks like ourselves really lean into this.
Yeah. Let's start with maybe just the news that you guys came out with late last week around some of the filing and what you're going after here with. We were actually popping this up here in the news section. What specifically are you guys filing for, and where does that fit in the context of Agora's vision with licensing and the state of regulation right now?
Yeah, so obviously the backdrop is Genius passed last year, which gave the OCC federal oversight of stablecoin issuance in the United States. And so we have been hard at work building the product to support like what is our future vision. And really the first quarter of this year, we're doing a lot of things to get us ready to file for a national trust bank charter. And so that's what we announced last Friday. We filed for Agora National Trust Bank. And so what that will do is it give us unified federal oversight, assuming we secure the charter in the United States, as well as expanding our product set. So today, we've had our stablecoin issuance for almost 2 years now. You and I have chatted a lot about this, but ultimately, I think being the issuer gives you a lot of margin and economics to play with in other aspects of the stack. Our mission has always been to bring businesses on chain, right? And there's really three things that they think about, when saying, okay, do I want to get into stablecoins? It's how do I touch and manipulate these assets, right? Which is broadly speaking, wallets or custody. How do I move from my existing financial perimeter, right, to this new world and vice versa, right? So they often, are using like, banks or maybe some payment businesses already. But this is a whole new world, right? From a cybersecurity perspective, from a tax perspective, audit, right? Stablecoins still aren't recognized, under like, cash, as cash, right? Or defined until Genius goes into effect, which, is problematic for a business, right? If you want to get an audit from PW. And then, what asset am I using, right? And today we really solve, what asset are you using? And what we say is you should use AUSD, one, because we'll pass the rewards, but also because we'll give you free mint and redeem against fiat. And so you could imagine that a lot of what we're going to be doing, moves us into the offering everything out of the box for businesses and companies that are trying to move money faster, earn more on their deposits, and really build a global business.
Has this always been kind of like the vision for Agora? Did you know like when you started 2 years ago that this was the route you wanted to go and you were waiting for the regulatory environment to, catch up? Or has this really developed recently? I know this conversation kind of accelerated with the hyperliquid USDH stuff.
Yeah.
But help us walk through tell us about that.
So we've always had this vision of really owning the whole stack. From before starting the business. And so the product vision has always been there. There's a lot of things that we have planned, right, that we haven't, announced yet. I would say the sequencing changed a little bit, right? Like you referenced, like the hyperliquid proposal, which was towards the end of last year. White labeled stables was always like on our roadmap. And we accelerated it because it was in vogue last year, but from my perspective, it's actually not super economic accretive to the business. And it was always like a feature, not the platform, right? We've always had this platform view, and what other features can you build on top of this platform? Core issuance is the platform. I would say when I was starting in the company, did I ever think that I would file an application to become CEO of a federally chartered bank? The honest answer would be no. We didn't. We started in a very different era, right? The Biden era. I would say genius happened much faster than I would have expected, to be honest. It's great because it pulled forward. I think the sort of demand horizon. And so last summer we said, okay, look, this is going to, we're going to have to get ready for this. It's happening faster than we thought. So we turned inward for a period of time to get us ready for this launch. But I think it's very exciting for us is, having clarity, right? Being what it takes to operate in the US, right? In one unified federal framework, that's great. Right. A lot of people previously were like stitching together 50 different MTLs plus maybe NYDFS. California had its own thing. And so, Genius is really just going to accelerate the adoption of stablecoins. I mean, to think that we're at 300 billion today and there's still no, active regulatory framework in the United States is crazy. So this is going to be a year of like a lot of preparation, and I think things next year and the year after, so 2027 and 2028, are really going to start to go gangbusters.
Yeah. Can you, when you were thinking about going bare metal, I think this is an idea or be the metal. I'm looking at the Agora.finance blog here. You said we have a saying at Agora: "You are the metal, or you lose." I guess speak a little bit to where that conviction came from and what that means for you all. It sounds like you've held that close for some time, but then I'd also love to step back and kind of see what options exist for actually being the metal and what that looks like and the approach you decided to take.
Yeah. So I think something that's been popularized over the last month or two, has been all the explosion of stablecoin neobanks, right? Whether they're consumer oriented or business oriented, pretty much all of them are using like the same stack, right? It's like, let me stitch together, a wallet company, an on and off ramp, cards, etc. And then they're basically just competing to death on CAC, right? And, our view is that you actually need to like be the core infrastructure because it gives you the margins to play with. I'm 50, there's 50 stablecoin neobanks. They're all using like, Bridge or something else, right? For on and off ramps. Okay, well, they're all going to have to charge 3 basis points or 5 basis points for USDC, USDT. They have no control over like the core product itself, like the stablecoin or the on and off ramp. And so what we said is like, we need to go build where we can make a difference for the long-term competitiveness of the product. And so that obviously starts with the stablecoin, which is why we started with it. What we're going to be able to do as well is say, okay, not only will you be able to earn the highest rewards on AUSD because we control the stablecoin, but we also are an on and off ramp by nature of being an issuer, right? And we'll say, hey, AUSD is for free. So while you're going to all these platforms and it's like as if when you sent money from Venmo to B of A, you pay 3 basis points. That's insane. No one would ever use that platform. That has sort of always been our view. And now with the charter, we are directly engaging with regulators on, what is going to be possible, right? And so we want to like have as few middlemen between us and the end customer where it makes sense. We will, of course, not build everything from scratch. And so we've picked and chosen where we think the strategic moat is over the long term. And that's where we want to be the metal, right? And there's a number of other like fantastic third-party providers for some of these services, right? Like, I don't think we need to reinvent custody and key management. I think that's been solved. But what we do need to do is go get the license to do it, right? So that we have more control over that offering and that experience for the business.
So speak a little bit to just wanted to go back to the different types of charters and filings. It's a little, for someone who doesn't come from the world of like regulation or legal or compliance, it's a little bit hard to know like what is the difference between, a national trust versus a NYDFS bit license or something like this? Is
Yeah.
there like what is it like? How do you even when you were thinking about the options that existed? Maybe this is a better way to ask. What options did you consider? Why did you go down this route that you chose?
So it's funny because when you or I think most people think of banking, they think of traditional deposit banking, right? I give you my money, you go lend it out, right? I have money in a dollar checking account, right? And that core business really is like, fractional reserve lending, right? That's not what we are. So my view as an issuer is you need to have global liquidity and access to fiat rails. And so issuers are actually really good complementary partners to banks, so like the traditional deposit taking bank that one thinks of. And so we are not engaging in that activity, right? Mercury announced that they got conditional approval yesterday to be a deposit taking bank, right? So if you're a Mercury customer in the past, they've been actually using Choice Financial as like the bank under the hood. They're now saying, okay, we actually are going to go take deposits ourselves and and lend out money, right? Very similar to Erebor. We're actually very good partners of Erebor. Right? We use them, as well as customers and a number of these other leading banks in the technology sector. And so we're complementary to them and not engaging in that activity. And so we recognized and said, hey, like this is really like a fundamentally core different business. We don't want to do that. All we want to do is have the ability to issue stable coins as well as custody digital assets. And then we can partner with banks in the US or Europe to offer dollar or euro accounts, right, in our customers' names and not actually have to build that infrastructure as well. It really would have been just too much. But again, I think as an issuer, you need to have global banking infrastructure, and no one can build that from scratch, like not even Circle, right?
When we think about, I guess where I'm trying to piece this in now, like say everything goes smooth, AUSD, like what is the upgrade to AUSD? How does this change the way people are using it, can using it? I mean, I always love asking just the question of like, what do you want to see built? Obviously, there's what people are coming to you to build now, but there is
Yeah.
this. What is your view of? Hey, you should go build this for AUSD.
Yeah. So today, right, a lot of our usage is third-party app based, right? It's
Yeah.
people that are building perp dexes, money movement apps, right? Are active in lending markets, and are building around AUSD. I would say what the charter does for AUSD itself is it now enables us to serve US customers directly, which we do not do today. We have an F license out of Bermuda. We made that decision, in a different era, right? Because there was no unified legislation in the US, right? And Genius is now encouraging us to come home. And so from day one, we'll be able to offer direct mint and redeem to US customers. But beyond that, it's the other products that will now be licensed to engage in, right? And sort of I skirted around some of those things. And what this really will enable is instead of just AUSD being used in third-party applications, it really enables the application of Agora itself, right? Where if you're a business that is trying to adopt stablecoins or earn more on your deposits or have a global dollar account, you can now come to Agora. You're going to be able to move money faster and cheaper than any other stablecoin neobank. You're going to earn more in terms of rewards, and you're going to have the safety and security of this being done in a national trust bank. And so I think that's killer. Really like, if you think about, and I really want to walk you through this because it is crazy. If you're a business today in the US and you're like, I want to adopt stablecoins. Okay, what are the things that you need to do? You need to get a Fireblocks account. You need to get either like a Coinbase, Kraken, or Circle Mint account. You need to get Cryptio for like, audit and reporting and like, depending on what you want to do, a variety of other applications. That is crazy. Right. And so, by stitching everything together out of the box, in one solution that offers, businesses an experience that they're familiar with in a trust bank setup, like we think that that's going to be a killer app.
Did not know about the relationship to Erebor here. I'm curious how that seems like like a perfect kind of lighthouse or hero use case for the future of where you see Agora fitting in and how you could work with others like them and banking partners like them. Like, how did that relationship come to be? What's the core way that you see the give and take here between what Agora is giving and providing and the specific unique value adds that are kind of out of the box that we're speaking to now. Maybe we just double click on Erebor and that specific go to market recipe, if you will.
Yeah, so we got introduced to Jacob and Owen, I want to say like maybe like a year ago now, quite a long time ago. And issuers are really sought after because we have very large, we're a large concentration of deposits, right? Which is what banks want.
Mm.
But also, both of our teams are trying to think about how we can push the frontier of money movement and stablecoin adoption, right? And they themselves are doing the deposit taking side and have the RTP and Fedwire and international rails of the old world, where we're sort of the new rails. We're using the new rails, right? Ethereum, Monad, Solana, and that's a really complementary pairing. Additionally, as an issuer, you need to be operating 24/7. That is not how the banking system works today, right? For pretty much everyone. The reason why so many folks in crypto were members at Customers Bank is because they had their 24/7 CBIT network, book transfer network, right? And so, when we first met them, they're really trying to push the boundary of, what I would say is like legacy banking, and we're on this, frontier on the stablecoin side, and using or looking into the APIs of all the leading technology banks, and said, hey, it would be great if we could collaborate and give you feedback as you design your APIs and your setup, right? Because this is a very synergistic relationship, and that was now probably a year ago, and it's funnily enough now I have many good friends who are actually working there, and so yeah, they're a great team, and we're excited to continue working with them and supporting their growth as they get things off the ground.
How difficult is it to go through, like, I've never filed for US federal charter. Like, what is that process? How hard is that? I think there's something there that's like
Yeah,
really important to understand as you think about, at least historically, I mean, when I was with Bastion and looking at the MTLs and kind of the V1 of like playing by the rules in the US, like go get all your MTLs, like that was very difficult. Like extremely hard. Every state is
yeah.
different. Every office is different. You got to deal with all that stuff. What does the experience practically look like? Timelines, complexity. Do you have people internally doing this full time? And most importantly, in my mind, do you see that complexity continuing to exist in the future? Because I'm imagining as a founder, there is a sense of like defensibility here if that complexity is there. How do you see that?
Yeah, so we actually originally decided to like, just avoid the 50 state MTL route because we wanted to just do one, work under one unified framework, right? Like that, you can probably attest to it that 50 different states with different regulations is a very challenging
It's just
thing to
crazy. Yeah.
manage. And like in some of the states, you don't actually even need the MTL because like they don't actually provide oversight. There's like 6 or 7 states or so. So, I think with Genius, having a unified framework is excellent. It's extremely challenging. Not only do you have to have the talent density at your organization and the experience, because they look at that, at the board level, the management team level, you need to have a tremendous amount of capital on your balance sheet. You're right. We raised, it's a large raise last year, but we spent like zero money on growth to date. Right. We hired our first person in marketing, 2 weeks ago. We have no like dedicated like sales force yet. And so there's a lot of
Wow.
capital that you have to have, available. And then it's, the body of work to build the business plan and the pro forma and constantly interacting with regulators, right? It's a very different motion than like a software business. We have 4 people on our compliance team already, right? We have an entire accounting and FinOps staff. It's very different motion than a traditional software business or companies that are building on top of like software or license rentals, right? And that aren't actually doing the work to get the license themselves. And that's why we turn inward for a bit, is like we need to one, build internal infrastructure, right? But hire the team and get the application in. And I think over the next few months you're going to see us focused really on growth for the first time. And I think the team is extremely excited. There's still a long road ahead. Just filing the charter doesn't, mean you get it, right? And so we're still actively working to secure it. But that first filing
Yeah.
is a good chunk of the work is out of the way, and we're very excited to continue engaging with regulators. I think, and two, if you're a regulator, this has got to be an amazing time for you. Like this is one of the most important pieces of bank regulation in American history. Like
Yeah.
it's like super exciting. And I think, there's going to be many books and probably movies and shows about like how much this is going to fundamentally change financial markets, capital markets, but also payments, not just in the United States, but globally. And so as a regulator too, I think it's a super exciting time. And I know that they've been working 24/7 as well. And so, this has been a busy year for us, but it's, been a busy year for a number of other folks as well.
It sounds like we need to start preparing for like the stablecoin genius era documentary. Start
Sounds
producing
like
that.
a riveting film.
I'm surprised there isn't one on Tether yet, right? Like Tether alone, I feel like got enough meat on the bone for someone to.
No, I feel like that would actually be a really good like YouTube documentary. And it will probably age very well.
We definitely got to make it ourselves as like an industry though, because we can't have, I like the Netflix one that they made about like, Robin Hood and whatever. They're just going to, rip us to shreds. So we got to like,
there's
maybe
some
we gotta make our
pretty
own propaganda first.
Yeah, there's some pretty cringe like crypto related movies and media out there. We'll take the Brian Armstrong approach with Coinbase is like create your own documentary before someone else creates one about you. That might be the approach. There's one about Bitcoin going around, Project Satoshi. I don't know if that's the name of it, but have either of you guys seen that new Bitcoin related movie that came out? Coinbase is pumping it right now.
I haven't seen it, but sounds like it's going to be my afternoon listening when
it
when
looks
they go into
it looks high quality. We'll revert back. I guess last question from my side. I mean, I get fired up hearing about the moment of regulation that we're in, and this kind of it seems like the stakes have never been higher, but the excitement is never been higher as well. What is from Nick's point of view? What is your perspective on your guidance or your like key, like the risks that exist of getting this wrong, really? Like what are the things that we need to get right here, that regulators need to get right from your own standpoint, that are currently still kind of up for debate or up for grabs?
Yeah, I think
loaded question.
I think a lot has been going on with regards to like rewards over the last couple months, and how banks are trying to use clarity as a means to change some things. I think ultimately issuers being able to distribute rewards in as unfettered a way as possible will be exceptional for consumers and businesses, not just in the United States, but globally, and attract people to the dollar. And so I'm hoping that, we get that right.
Zach, any final?
Yeah, yesterday when they were asking me about what I thought about, the banking groups, I had to keep my mouth a little bit shut on, especially at the New York Stock Exchange.
Yeah,
no,
100%.
none for me. I think it's an exciting time to be. I mean, I was thinking about like, okay, if we had to go from 0 to 100, what percent is Agora at right now? And it sounds like you're still in the early stages, which I think is actually a good thing with the progress you're able to make on the regulatory front. We're excited to see what you're able to do once you kick in the growth and obviously the work that we're doing together. So
yeah,
sure
we're great. And on that
the
point,
first
we're
of
grateful.
many more conversations to come.
Many more. We're grateful to work with you. We're pumped to have Agora as a sponsor of the show. More highlights and more to come on that. But yeah, we're pumped to be building top-notch programming around this space, and we're excited to work with you guys to bring us in the room and kind of know where to spotlight. You guys are doing so many incredibly foundational parts of this, and just grateful to be in it with you. It's been fun.
Yeah. Thank you guys for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Nick.
See ya.
See ya.